You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Weston Williams, joined this week by Oliver Camacho and Ashley Hardgrave. All right, this week we go inside the huddle with soprano Amanda Majeski. The tap-dancing Mozart and Strauss diva hails from Gurnee, Illinois, and now lives in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Listeners, you will be shocked, I tell you, when you find out where her sports allegiance lies. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, where are all the gay white male opera administrators going? Are they starting their own super opera company in P-Town? Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify. Click follow on Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign, send us a voice memo, or email us your hot takes. Mailbag at operaboxscore.com. That's a new email right there. Or just record your thoughts using the You Got Something to Say page on our website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you'll get an OBS beer coaster, an OBS lapel pin, and an all-new #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot take. Oliver, I've got my eyes on that foam finger. How about you?
That's a lot of F's in that phrase there, the foam finger for the fans. I don't know
we
what
love alliteration.
That's some yes. Wagnerian alliteration right there.
Yeah, I think the headline that we sort of buried is that we have a new website. We talked about it last week, but it really is brand sticking new, and we're finally
it's so cute.
We're not ashamed to send people to operaboxscore.com.
Well, at least no more shame than we should be. Ashley Hardgrave, what is your opinion on foam fingers?
I am always a fan of the foam finger. How's that for alliteration? But I should tell our listeners, we are recording very late on a Sunday evening. I have spent the majority of today watching NFL games. So I started at noon. I started with the Bears game, as disappointing as it was, at noon, and then continued to watch football games, all NFL, all afternoon. And then I went to not quite the premiere, but an opening of a new musical. And I'm not sure I've ever had a more me day in like months. So lots of football, some musical theater. Let's go.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
Well, if you're listening to the pod while it's still steaming like fresh poop in the snow, you have a chance to catch Amanda Majeski's recital with pianist Milos Rapitsky at Opera Philadelphia's Curtis Voices series, just one of the offerings of Festival 023, which kicks off this week. As Ashley said, we are recording late on a Sunday night so that I can get on a plane tomorrow morning to Philadelphia. I'm trying to beat the crowds by arriving 4 days early like it's a Taylor Swift concert. Amanda Majeski has established herself as a celebrated interpreter of Mozart, Strauss, Wagner, and Handel, in addition to starring as the Countess in the Richard Eyre production of Marriage of Figaro, which was broadcast in HD. Another high-profile performance, the title role in Janacek's Katya Kabanova at Royal Opera Covent Garden, won Best New Opera Production at the 2019 Olivier Awards. My relationship with Amanda Majeski began when I heard her sing at Chicago Opera Theater in the Christopher Alden production of Clemenza di Tito, right before she began her apprenticeship at the Ryan Opera Center at Lyric Opera of Chicago. Let's hear a little bit of Amanda Majeski singing Vitellia from Opera Paris. just a little bit of the first act aria of Vitellia from Mozart's Clemenza di Tito, a performance from the Paris Opera featuring our guest today on Opera Box Score, Amanda Majeski. Welcome to OBS.
Hello. It's so nice to be with you all. Thank you for having me this morning.
Oh my gosh. I've been wanting to talk to you for how long now? 14 years. I finally get to do it. So I'll just, to give the audience a little bit of context, you were in Chicago to do the Ryan Opera Center program. I'm not sure if that coincided with Chicago Opera Theater casting you as Vitelli. Was that before or afterwards?
So I believe the Clemenza di Tito was first, I believe somewhere in March. And then my Ryan Opera Center contract started just a few weeks after that.
Okay.
So the two did not go together per se, but they came together.
That's one of those reasons why I think I was so confused. Like, did they know that she was doing this and they already released her to do this? So that was the Christopher Alden production under the Brian Dickey regime of Chicago Opera Theater and the amazing Jane Glover. I mean, so many great components coming together to make that, I think, my favorite Clemenza I've ever seen. And you had a lot to do with that. I mean, the singing we can talk about in a little bit. But to me, it is your body that made that so weird, so deliciously weird. I mean, you were bending yourself into these weird angles, and you look like one of those like Beaux-Arts paintings or like Egon Schiele. Like, I don't know what you studied or what you did to make yourself so sinister, snaky, I don't even know how to describe it. And I don't know if you could still do it. I don't know. This is 14 years later. Do you still have that flexibility?
Well, Oliver, I come from dance training, and dance was my first artistic love. So, from a very young age, I'm talking 4 or 5 years old. I was in dance classes and connecting with music that way, and particularly took a love for tap dancing and have used that with various opera companies who have asked for it over the years.
Tap dancing Vitellia.
Yeah, that has not come up. We'll see, time will tell. But, I've always first connected with music through bodily movement. That's just kind of within me. And so when I connect with a director for whom eccentric music, movement, or character can be revealed through the movement of the body, it's really thrilling for me. So I remember Christopher Alden talking about this character, and we used the analogy of Reese Witherspoon in Election. I don't know if you ever knew that.
Yes.
Just very tightly wound, very pent up, and Chris Alden would kind of showcase kind of how he wanted the body to look. And then I just always lean hard into my dance training and kind of take what the director has as an idea, connect it with the music, and formulate something that makes sense and hopefully reads, to the audience. I'm so glad that did for you. That's wonderful.
Oh, it was amazing. And this was a time in my personal career where I was trying to start an opera company and was looking for people who just had an extra skill that they brought to the table. And I felt like you could have done that role without singing and it would have still read because it was so physically dramatic.
No, well, and I think you asked the other question of, can I still do that? I'm older now than I was in 2009, but I think that's our duty as artists, right? Our instrument is housed within our body. So how we use our body to express character and express texts and tell the story is part of our duty.
Since then, you have gone on to sing the major Mozart and Strauss heroines, and you even got a chance to sing Vitellia at Lyric Opera Chicago. And I don't know if that's a Pennell production, but it feels like a Pennell production. It's just like very like columns and, goddess gowns and stuff like that. And a very kind of more classic version of that opera. But you also got to sing at a very high profile Marriage of Figaro, the Downton Abbey Marriage of Figaro. I forget who was the director for that.
Are you speaking of the Met's Figaro?
Yes,
that's Richard Eyre.
Richard Eyre, yeah. So you became sort of like this Mozart and Strauss girl, and I'd love to talk to you about those operas specifically. But do you have an idea how at the early stage of your career you already began to align with these composers who I think are asking for very specific things from singers, like a temperamental quality and a technical quality?
Well, I think this Mozart Strauss label was, to be honest, mostly defined by the industry, because that's what I was hired to do. I was very lucky that I like Mozart and I like Strauss, and my voice seemed to make sense in those pieces. And of course, Mozart is such a challenge vocally. It's thrilling because every time you revisit it, there's something new. You are new as a singer approaching that piece, and then there's always something to redefine or refine or look at in a new way, depending on who else joins you in the room in that experience. And I've always kind of referred to Strauss as the dessert. You use similar skills that you use in Mozart, because there's this demand for these, big, long, sweeping legato lines in which you express most deeply through the entirety of it. But the orchestration under Strauss is so different. So it's kind of like taking the reins away, so to speak, and flying on top of the orchestra. When Strauss is really working well, it's an exhilarating feeling, because it feels like you're being carried by that orchestra. As long as you allow your breath to release underneath you, that's the key to that experience. But I think more broadly, I think we need to be careful in our industry about how we label or how we box singers in. I think those days are kind of over. I think we can challenge our audiences and our lovers of opera to resist putting a singer in a particular box. Oh, they sing Mozart and Strauss, and allow that singer the opportunity to sing what works for them in the moment, what makes sense for them as a human, as an artistic being in the moment, as we grow and change and evolve throughout our life and throughout our artistic life, So while I feel very proud to have had the opportunity to luxuriate in Mozart and Strauss roles, I'm also eager to explore other facets and other sides to my artistic being. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed singing Katya Kabanova so much. A beautiful Janacek role that is an incredibly fascinating, dramatic character, and does call for that kind of intense body work that I love so much, on stage. And so I think it's exciting when we look at art and artistry and the possibilities of that a little bit more broadly.
Well, I think we're used to seeing singers of your ilk make the transition from Strauss to Janacek, I think because both of these composers are very text-driven. I want to put a pin in that, and I just want to go back to something you said about Mozart and Strauss having similarly long lines. Somehow I feel that Mozart, even though he's always testing his singers, he really understood the human voice and he knew what was possible. And even though some of these lines are ridiculous, they are like usually the length of a human breath. They may be a superhuman human breath, but they make sense, and that he doesn't ask for the most important the climax of the phrase to be at the very end of the phrase. He puts the climax at like the 2/3 point or even at the halfway point, so you still have breath to make it to the end. Whereas Strauss, I feel like his phrase lengths are unusual because he just drops whole notes in like wherever he feels like it. And you suddenly find yourself at the end of a phrase, like singing just one more whole note. And there's something you have to do. And like you do it, so I can't explain it. But the great Strauss singers do it. Gundula Janowitz, Lucia Popp, Elizabeth Soderstrom, even Elizabeth Schwarzkopf. We don't really talk about her that much on this show. But it's something about the way you negotiate with overtones so that as the orchestra is like filling in or changing harmonies or swooping underneath you, you're just hanging on and you are making your voice more pointed by just the way you place it or something. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it's something you do very well. And I wish I could like get a recording of it and play it back to see that's what you did it right there. And that
Well, I appreciate that, Albert. I think it's all about the breath, to be perfectly honest. For me, it's trusting that kind of deep, low, open, relaxed, released breath so that you can vary the speed and the depth of the breath as you persist through the phrase. If you ask a different singer, maybe they would think of it a little bit differently. But I think the overtones that you speak of that create that beautiful effect of soaring over the orchestra ultimately come from the flexibility of the breath. I don't tend to think about placing my sound in a certain way, because for me, when I try to do that, my breath stops and I suddenly have to kind of figure out then where I go to find the freedom. So for me, it's all about how that breath moves. And then if the breath is free, the voice is free to go where it needs to be placed for that experience. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have your technique at all, so I'll have to try to imagine that sensation, But I mean, I do think that a Mozart Strauss singer, just being very, very generic here, differs from a bel canto singer, and that the bel canto technique, I'm not accusing you of not having a bel canto technique, but the bel canto singer stays on a vowel and you hear, the volume increase usually by just, pouring on breath. But the color of the voice doesn't change. Whereas you have a way with color, like what you're doing with your breath, it makes different light come through. And bel canto singers are more about like just the tone is always like the same, But yeah. So I don't know if that maybe makes you, because you have that quality, sort of puts you in the Mozart Strauss box, or if you've experimented with singing bel canto and you just didn't care for it.
I did actually experiment with a little bit of bel canto in my younger days. Actually, I even covered Puritani with Opera Theater of St. Louis. That was one of my asks in my young artist training days. But for me, as lovely as that music is, you're right in that there are some voices that make a little more sense in it than others. And for me, it wasn't quite my personality either. Those bel canto roles. So I never really felt the urge to explore bel canto. But I think we should give space to artists and maybe open ears as well. So that, well, I think we have these glorious recordings of these incredible singers singing these roles, right? And we cherish them. And for those of us who are lucky to be in the audience when they were singing these roles, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. But until we approach an operatic experience with an open mind, with love for those recordings, but an open mind to maybe consider a different approach or a different sound in those pieces, or a different interpretation, or a different body style, I think the more open-minded we are when we go into those kind of experience, the more opera comes to life for our audiences.
Well, Well,
Yeah,
speaking
I'm
of,
pretty passionate about not putting
yes,
stuff in boxes, Oliver. I don't know.
I feel that. I feel it.
Going through.
Trust me. And it is your unique brand of physicality and your vocalism that does make you a very interesting Salome and Katya Kabanova. But I think the role that has almost become your calling card, for better or for worse, is Marta in Mstislav Weinberg's The Passenger. And this is a very difficult opera to talk about, but this is the High Holy Holidays right now. So
Mhm.
I don't forget when Holocaust Remembrance Day is, but I feel like it's coming up soon. I don't know if you can talk to us a little bit about preparing this role and having to do it. I don't know what it takes out of you. I mean, like, I just get emotional just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So please feel free to say as much or as little as you'd like to say about
No,
this.
I'm happy to speak about it. I think we need to, right? I think it's important to have these conversations about our past so that the next generation remembers and learns and explores. It's an incredible piece, The Passenger by Weinberg. And I've had the honor of playing Marta once before at Lyric Opera Chicago. And we'll have the honor again coming up in, I believe the performances are in March, at Teatro Real in Madrid, in the same David Poutney production. And this was just an extraordinary privilege, beyond opportunity, right? To explore a part of our shared history in humanity, to connect with someone like Sofia Posmich, who wrote the book, The Passenger, who survived Auschwitz. She came to Lyric Opera Chicago, and she came to every opening night of performances of The Passenger, to share a little bit of her story, to connect with us, the artists who were performing. I remember at Lyric, I had the privilege of wearing her number on my arm. It gets me emotional too, Oliver, to think back to that time and to think about the intensity of this subject matter, which is more than a story. It's our truth. There's a beautiful moment at the end of the piece in which the character of Marta ages to present day, and she's remembering all of these people that she shared the experience with in the camp, and she's saying the names of each of these characters, but prisoners, and speaking about how important it is to not forget. I will never forget that moment when that monologue finishes, the orchestra dies down, and Sir Andrew Davis, who was conducting that, held his hands up and just slowly brought them down. And there was a pause from the audience in which we had about, if I were being honest, maybe 20, 30 seconds of silence, but it felt like an eternity up there on stage. And I just remember us all being kind of held in that experience. I've never felt so connected to an audience.
Mm.
It's just something that I'll hold precious to myself for the rest of my life, because that's what sharing art should be all about. We get up on stage hoping to serve others with what we do, and we hope that ultimately we can bring people together to be held in an experience for a moment, despite our different backgrounds and our different stories and where we go after the opera and where we came from, to be able to feel that in such a tangible way, in such an important piece, it's a life-changing thing, really. So I'm pretty excited to perform it again with Teatro Real coming up.
from the promotional video of The Passenger from its lyric opera production conducted by Sir Andrew Davis. The one in Madrid will be conducted by Mirga Grazinite Tila, another rising star. She's just not a rising star. She's a star of classical music. So that's going to be an incredible collaboration in Madrid in March. Just in the last few seconds I have with you, Amanda, we got to turn it light. Can you participate in our contest that we have about what is the best act of a Mozart opera? Figaro 2, Giovanni 1, Cosi 1. Do you want to throw Clemenza in that mix?
Sure, why not?
For you, which one, having sung all four of those operas, is your favorite act of a Mozart opera?
Phew. Well, I mean, it's just this is an impossible question.
I know the Cosi, it's based on who you're singing with, because, like as you said, it really is such an ensemble piece. But Figaro too has the best entrance. I think Mozart's best entrance is.
It's really true. I think Figaro 2 is a masterpiece. I mean, they all are. But can I say Giovanni 2?
Yeah, Giovanni 2. You mean Act 2 of Giovanni?
Act 2 of Giovanni.
Okay. That's new. Well, just because it loses its verisimilitude because of the statue coming to life and being dragged to hell. So
it's long. I will say that. I don't. And if it's helpful, I can say Giovanni 1. I mean, the whole thing is brilliant.
No, but Giovanni 2 does have Mitradi, which is an aria you sing so well. And
I had two extraordinary arias for soprano voice in Non mi dire also. I think, to be perfectly honest, I know it's not the entire act, but there are two moments that as a singer illuminate that act for me, and it's the sextet in Act 2, sola sola muy loco, just complete joy to sing on stage. And then, of course, as I'm sitting backstage, the trio as Giovanni is dragged down to hell. It's just an extraordinary piece of writing. I know you're talking about the act as a whole. Yeah. So if I were really going to say the act as a whole, I would say Act 2 of Figaro, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, I will say that.
The way the finale is through composed. I mean, it's just brilliant.
Yeah. I think you're forgetting to take into account that in Giovanni 2, you have Metà di voi, which is, I don't know why that's in there.
I mean, it's a little on the slow side. Giovanni might argue with that, though.
Amanda Majeski, thank you so much for coming to Opera Box Score. Your recital with pianist Milos Rapitsky is this Friday at Curtis Institute at 4:00. If you're listening to this on Thursday, please join me there. We're done. Sorry, I
get to the sports question.
Do you want to do it? Because we can squeeze it in. I mean, I just don't want to waste your time because I said 30 minutes.
Well, I teach at University of Michigan now, Oliver. So okay, I have to be a Wolverine. Go blue.
Okay, go for it. So you're a Wolverines fan, but the Packers is part of your life now that you live in Sheboygan?
No. It's I have a lot of Packers fans surrounding me. I'm thrilled for them. I will always be a Chicago girl, but like I said, I spend half of my time in Ann Arbor, Michigan, working with the voice students there, and so I'm pretty excited about the Michigan football team if I was going to pick one.
So that was a big surprise to me. Not the Bears, not the Packers, but University of Michigan. What are they called? The Blues? The Blues?
Wolverines.
Wolverines. Okay. Yeah, shocking. I don't know what that means for her family in Gurnee or her neighbors in Sheboygan, but
go blue.
It's Michigan. So there you go.
It's
everybody.
Michigan. It's a big hand. What more can you say?
You heard it here first on Opera Box Score. So speaking of football, you have a fantasy football update.
Yeah, I do have a fantasy football update from enemy of the show, Tobias Wright, who says, Week 1, we lost a close one. We had some fellas that simply forgot how to tie their shoes and compete and thus ended up on the wrong side of the battle. That's an update from George through Toby, or from Toby through George, I suppose. And once again, I am utterly bemused and befuddled as to how fantasy football works. If you're not rolling a D20, I don't know what anything that starts with fantasy means. So,
well, before we get to the 2-minute drill, we've got to hear Ashley's opinion on the Achilles tendon.
Speaking of bemused and befuddled, listen, I've had plenty to say on this broadcast about one Karen Rogers when she played for the Green Bay Packers. Now that she played for 4 whole plays for the New York Jets, I gotta say, this is not a Schadenfreude moment. This is not a time for me to rejoice. I am interested that now he magically believes in science since doctors are going to heal his Achilles tendon, but I digress. It is a bummer. It's a big bummer for the Jets. They invested a lot of money and a lot of time in this. There's so much media behind this. I have an actor friend that did a commercial with Aaron Rodgers in New York to boost all of this. So it is a real bummer that there is an Achilles tear that's going to knock him out for the season. Even somebody I don't like, that injury is a bummer. So my hope for the New York Jets is that their fandom can rally behind the other guy who is the quarterback, whose name nobody knows, but we're crossing our fingers for you, buddy.
It's actually me. I'm filling in.
It's Weston. Listen, buddy, you got this. It's going to be great.
I'm going to do my best. I have never been able to throw a ball in my life. I literally can't figure out how to throw a football, but
But you got the foam finger, so you'll be fine. So.
Yeah, I've got... Let's go to the 2-minute drill.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Berlin Staatsoper Intendant Matthias Schulz is reiterating his support for the Anna Trebko ahead of her appearance in Macbeth, saying, "I can well understand the frustration on the Ukrainian side that more artists and athletes in Russia are not standing up and trying to rouse civil society. But the question is it okay to disinvite artists who have expressed themselves?" The interview comes on the heels of a letter signed by 100 figureheads from the worlds of culture, politics, and academia, calling for Netrebko's performances to be canceled.
Cleveland Institute of Music students did a silent sit-in on Thursday to protest the drop of the Title IX investigation against conductor Carlos Kalmar. You'll remember in our August reporting that the CIM Title IX committee found that the allegations against Kalmar, quote, did not violate the sexual assault, sexual harassment, and sex non-discrimination policy under Title IX. CIM student government publicized, but, and this is important, did not organize the sit-in as the first orchestra rehearsal of the year was happening, where students wore blue and sat without instruments. Their message, according to the SGA social media posts, was that CIM foster an environment that supports all of its students.
The musicians of the Philadelphia Orchestra have overwhelmingly voted to reject a proposed contract from management. 85 of the musicians voted against the Philadelphia Orchestra's best and final offer, quote unquote, with 2 abstentions. Not a single musician voted in favor of the deal. Quote, "The results of this vote send a clear message that Philadelphia's musicians stand together and will not accept anything less than a fair contract," said union rep and contrabassoonist Holly Blake. "We stand together for the future of the orchestra."
Robert Wilson is one of this year's 5 laureates of the Premium Imperiale, known as the Nobel of the Arts. The Premium Imperiale honors artists in painting, sculpture, theater, cinema, music, and architecture, and grants each laureate 15 million yen. The avant-garde theater legend Bob Wilson helped transform the way opera is seen around the world, but he remains much better known in Europe than so in his home country, particularly in France, where he was entrusted with inaugurating the Opera Bastille in 1989.
Renee Fleming is nothing if not on trend, recently revealing to the San Diego Union Tribune that she is now a pickleball enthusiast. This is a quote. "You know, I have a very unusual lifestyle. I spent the whole day yesterday in Pittsburgh at a pickleball event because my sister-in-law has become someone who is so good at it that she tours and wins prizes. And I so feel indoctrinated now. I mean, if all the cool kids are doing it."
In trade news, Anthony Freud will retire as general director of the Lyric Opera of Chicago at the end of the season, ending a 13-year tenure with the company. Freud was contracted all the way through 2026, but he intends to return to Britain right after this season is over.
Florida Grand Opera's general director and CEO Susan T. Danis has announced her resignation. Danis began her tenure with the company in 2012, and has produced popular traditional grand operas as well as award-winning educational and engagement programs.
Spoleto Festival USA has announced that Timothy Myers will be the company's new director. Myers is currently the music director at Austin Opera. Meanwhile, Boston Baroque has announced the appointment of UK native Sarah Radcliffe Mars as its new executive director. Her tenure is set to commence on November 1st.
In not trade news, the Napoli Labor Court has reinstated Stefan Lissner as the artistic director and intendant of the Teatro San Carlo di Napoli. Lissner had initially been let go from the position due to local regulations that prohibit anyone over the age of 70 to hold a government job. No word yet on what will happen to Carlo Fuertes, who took over Lissner's old position earlier this month.
On the disabled list, tenor Jonathan Tettleman has contracted COVID and canceled his September 15th performance of Madama Butterfly. Rodrigo Porras Garullo took over the role of Pinkerton. We wish Tettleman a speedy recovery, even though Pinkerton is a jerk.
Exit stage right. Italian film and opera director Giuliano Montaldo has died at the age of 93 in Rome. Montaldo also served as the president of Italy's Rai Cinema from 1999 to 2004, and also went on to direct opera.
Italian soprano Margherita Rinaldi has died at the age of 88. Born in 1935, she made her operatic debut in 1958 in the title role of Lucia di Lammermoor. She sang a wide variety of roles, also for Rai, between 1963 and 1975.
Soprano Hilda de Groot died at the age of 77 in August. She made her debut at the Royal Opera Ghent in 1961 in Tales of Hoffmann, and went on to perform with the company in numerous roles.
And on this day, September 17th, in 1605, it was the birth of composer Francesco Sacrati. More birthdays include Saverio Mercadante, who was baptized on this day in 1795, so he was probably born close to September 17th. In 1880, French conductor and composer D.E. Engelbrecht was born in Paris. In 1885, it was the birth of the Azerbaijani composer Uzeyir Hajibayev. In 1892, Dutch composer Hendrik Andriessen was born. In 1920, it was the birth of the Met broadcast announcer Peter Allen. In 1931, sort of a birth, it was the first long-playing record to rotate at 33 1/3 revolutions per minute, demonstrated by the RCA Victor Company. Tenor Pierre Duval was born this day in 1932. Italian tenor Renato Francesconi was born this day in 1934. And on September 17th, Spanish composer Miguel Gomez Martinez was born in 1949. First performances include Offenbach's La Belle Hélène in 1864, Louis-Auguste Florimond Ronger's Le Cabinet Piperlin, and that quadruple-decker name is simply Hervé. That's his moniker. Hervé's Le Cabinet Piperlin in 1897. In 1964, a bop, Gottfried von Einem's Der Zerrissene. And in 1982, it was the first performance of Three Sisters Who Are Not Sisters by David Ahlstrom, not to be confused with the opera of the same name by Ned Rorem, both of which are on Weston's best of lists.
And that's your 2-minute drill, which wasn't a 2-minute drill, but it was a 2-minute drill. That's your 2-minute drill.
Just a little bit of Hilda de Groot from a live performance in 1977, singing Signore Ascolta. And look, everybody, as Ashley said at the top of the show, we're pushing 11 o'clock. All of us have jobs in the morning. We beg your indulgence that there's actually a lot of news this week that needs to be discussed, especially the Tanis resignation and the Anthony Freud resignation. And we want to do a better job of that for you. So we are going to discuss especially Anthony Freud and what his tenure at Lyric Opera meant to this Chicago company. on next week's show. And we'll also talk about why all these people are leaving, not just Chicago and Florida, but also recent departures in Philadelphia and Seattle.
I will say, with all of the different strikes and contracts and votes, it's really, we were in hot girl summer. Now we're into hot labor fall because we've got the Musicians at Philadelphia Orchestra. We've got the ongoing strikes with Writers Guild and with SAG. United Auto Workers went on strike effective on Friday. It's really, we are in a dawn of labor organization, labor collectivism, labor rights. And it's, as a member of a union, it's really delightful to see. So, I'm sorry Philly didn't get a better offer, but clearly they made their voices heard when they voted against it. So it's, everybody should be paying attention to unions right now.
Yeah, and it's so wild to me that it was so unanimous. Only 2 abstentions, no votes for the contract. That is hard to accomplish, which just goes to show how inadequate they felt the contract was. So we'll see what happens, see just how final this opera is. It's a huge, huge orchestra. It's so important, Yannick Nézet-Séguin is in charge. So everyone's eyes are on Philadelphia, even though it's not strictly an opera company. Very important repercussions for the opera world. And I think another sort of important repercussion for the opera world is perhaps what's happening with Anna Netrebko, unfortunately.
Listen, our listeners have heard me enough talk about my displeasure with her being in news and thought of and talked about, and I would love to not give her any more airspace, but I don't know. OC, what are you thinking?
I feel like we've talked about it, and, as part of my other job, I have to talk to very famous singers. I get to talk to very famous singers, and I follow them on their social medias and just see what they're doing. And I see them interacting with Anna Netrebko, and they have to do the compulsory, backstage photo smiles, great cast, toy, everybody, and I see her name in there. And, I just feels like it's something we're going to have to live with. I know people who should know better, who say that her voice is so unique and, we can't deprive audiences of her artistry, blah, And it's
that is so cute, and they are so wrong, but go
just
ahead.
Just go for it, everybody. Just enjoy yourselves. Just have a great time with that. I'm not here to block anybody from making a living. And that's all I have to say about it. We are not a fan of Anna Netrebko. She will never be our interview guest unless we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel. But
it would be an interesting interview. She might sue us.
I'll do it.
I think that the other big news item for this week, to kind of wrap things up here, is Renee Fleming getting into pickleball. That is top headline news to me. I don't understand the current obsession with pickleball. Do either of you get it, or is it just me? I feel like George here, not understanding what the kids are doing.
It's a thing. It's a thing. For people that have an interest in tennis but aren't willing to go there, pickleball can be a really nice sort of gateway drug for folks. So there's a very specific subset of my social circle that has taken an interest in pickleball. So when I saw this news article that Renee Fleming was into it, I was like, checks out.
Oliver Camacho, as the podcast's resident tennis expert, do you feel like tennis is in danger from the rising tide of pickleball?
I mean, not to say that it's not athletic. It certainly is athletic, but it's less athletic and there's less running than tennis. It's more about fast hands. And I could see how people who have less athletic ability could enjoy tennis. And I think getting people out, doing something, exercising, being with people, all of it is good. And I just want to say that we're missing George right now because he would have something to say about Robert Wilson. I don't think any of us have anything to contribute to the Robert Wilson Award.
Oh, I love Robert Wilson.
Yeah, but maybe we can ask him to comment about it next week.
Yeah. Well, I think that about does it. Let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. That is how we end the show, even on this sleepy, sleepy evening without George Cedarquist in charge. Let's start with Oliver Camacho.
There's this great post from Ken Whitman that's been making the rounds on social media. Ken Whitman, the former VP of opera at Wolf Trap. She says this: I don't know exactly where opera is going, and I'm sure that the state of the art in a few decades will be something that will surprise us all. For the sheer number of smart, expressive, committed, and exciting young artists bodes extremely well for the future of opera. To be sure, some of our institutional baggage is crumbling, and some is painfully morphing under the strain of change. But new models are emerging. New audiences are learning that our brand of storytelling is uniquely valuable, and the next generation of artists is finding the bravery and stamina it needs to catapult us forward. The next time that someone tells you opera is dead, imagine that you are with us on the annual audition odyssey, that almost every day for a month you sit in the back of a large room, and every 10 minutes a new talented singer with a story to tell walks in and gives you hope. From Kim Whitman, the audition queen. We've brought in her content to this show many times.
Honestly, work.
It sounded more like a Walt Whitman quote. That gave me chills. Ashley Hardgrave.
Yeah, maybe you should have started with me and let Oliver close. So my good call is another magical intersection between music and sports. The marching band for the University of Iowa, the Iowa Hawkeyes, they on the field this weekend honored mega basketball star, University of Iowa star Caitlin Clark. They recreated this iconic Selly play, literally with their bodies. They did as their drill charts on the field. They recreated one of the plays that she did earlier this year as Iowa was on its way to the national championship. You can find the footage on ESPN. All you need to do is Google Iowa hockey band Caitlin Clark. It is delightful. You should check it out.
And that is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, get your voice heard, and find links to stuff we've talked about on our new and improved website, operaboxscore.com. And that's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS on the Support the Team page. Your announcer is Norm Woodell, your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is Weston Williams. Hey, that's me. For co-host Ashley Hardgrave with guest Amanda Majeski, I'm Weston Williams, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as Renee Fleming indoctrinates you to taste the pickle. We're back with an all-new show next week when we introduce a new segment called Swings and Misses and look back at Anthony Freud's tenure at Lyric Opera. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more tap dancing Salome. Join us.